A surveillance video of a police shooting that took place in the Bronx in 2012 has left one family questioning about how and when their 18-year-old died. The video obtained by the New York Daily News shows paramedics carrying Ramarley Graham out of his home strapped to a backboard and putting him on a stretcher. One of the paramedics then appears to cover Graham's face with a sheet before slightly removing it. Officials first reported that Graham died at Montefiore Medical Center, and his death certificate says he was shot at 3:01 p.m. and died at 3:53 p.m. Police initially went to the 18-year-old's Bronx home on East 229th Street after receiving a report that he had a gun, but after the incident, no gun was recovered. Now, the video raises a lot of questions, not just for the family, but for everyone. Here in studio, we're joined by criminal defense attorney Alexander Sanchez, here to break down all of it for us and tell us exactly what might have went wrong. And now we do want to say that the Graham family did settle their lawsuit against the city for $3.9 million in January of 2015. And after looking at this video, what are we seeing?
I'm very troubled by what I see. Okay, let's go over the facts of the case one more time, just in case, somebody is not aware of it. The police received some report over the radio run that somebody may appear to have some type of weapon, and they claim that person was Ramarley Graham because he was making some type of movement by his waist. Well, if the police had belief that somebody has a weapon, you have a right to stop them. If you believe somebody is armed, you have a right to stop them, but they did not stop him. Instead, they followed him. That leads me to believe that they were not sure if he had a weapon or not. But if they weren't sure, they could have called him over. They could have called other police officers over to say, hey, listen, we'd like to talk to you. Do you have anything on you? To take those type of actions. Instead, they follow him, and at some point, Ramarley starts running, and he runs into his house. You have a right to run into your house. You don't have to stop and walk. You have a right to run. He runs into his house, and here's where things went very wrong with the police activities here. Here's where the police came, and if you look at the video, they start kicking in the door. And that's extremely troubling behavior, because why is a police officer kicking in a door? He's placing people in that home at risk. If there is a man with a gun, he's placing himself at risk, because if someone is breaking into your house and they have a gun, they could shoot through the door. He's placing his fellow officers that may have been present, and he's placing the general public in jeopardy. You see, what happened here, as I'm studying this case and I look at it, it becomes a matter of the chase. It's not a matter of whether or not Ramarley Graham had a gun. It's a matter that Ramarley Graham may have been running away. It becomes a matter of domination and control. I have to win this situation. That's the situation with the police. And you know what? They did win that situation, because that kid ended up dead.
Well, let's talk about this. According to his family, the video indicates he was already dead, contradicting the city account that, that said that he had died later on. Let's go into that.
What's the difference? What's the difference if he died later on, or what's the difference if he died on the scene? He died, and he died because of a gunshot, and he died because the police officer came in the house. They could have, instead of marching into that house and breaking into the house, they could have simply called other police officers and surrounded the house. They could have called on the phone and say, listen, if you're in there with a gun, we don't want any problems. Come on outside, let us in. They could have taken so much other action. But instead, they charged him there. He ran into a bathroom, and they shot him. Now, nobody was there at that time. So maybe nobody will ever know for sure what exactly just gave justification to the police officer for shooting. But I got news for you. If the police officer was breaking into that house, and Ramarley Graham or anybody in that house had a gun and shot him, Ramarley Graham or anybody in that house may have been justified. Because if someone is breaking into your house and committing a burglary, armed, and you don't know who they are, you may be allowed to shoot that person. So there was a lot of mistakes and improper activity that had taken place.
I want to go to this. The officer involved in the shooting, of course, is Officer Richard Hayes. Now, next week, it says last week from the NYPD, he will finally face a departmental trial. Many people are saying, what took so long? Why is it taking so long to bring him to at least this departmental trial?
Yeah, that's a big question that even I have. This case is already a couple of years old. It went before 2 grand juries. And by the way, just in case anybody doesn't understand what happened, Mr. Haste was arrested. His case was presented to a grand jury. Now, in all cases in New York City, if you're charged with a felony, it must first stop at the grand jury in order for it to continue as a felony. Okay, it stops at the grand jury. evidence is presented before a grand jury. But and they voted an indictment for manslaughter, meaning that this cop did something wrong. He used excessive force or something. But what happened was the defense attorneys challenged the way the case was presented to the grand jury. They challenged the information and the evidence that was presented to the grand jury, and a judge looked at those grand jury proceedings and said, you know what, Mr. Defense Attorneys, you're right. This case was improper, and he dismissed it. Let me tell you something about dismissing grand jury cases. That's maybe 1 out of every 150 or 200 cases get dismissed. Maybe 1 out of every 300. So for this case to have been dismissed is very rare, but it was done, giving him a second chance. And he got his second chance, and it went before a second grand jury, and the second grand jury decided not to indict him. And that's why he's not facing criminal charges. He's facing departmental charges, but the most the department can do is say, you know what, we're going to fire you. That's what they're going to do.
And so the family says, exactly, what are my repercussions? We know that they've actually sued in the civil. They've got the $3.9 million lawsuit against the city that was settled. But what else can a family get out of this?
First of all, does money ever really compensate for the death of your child? That's not going to compensate. Yeah, okay, you have some extra money, but that's not real justice. Real justice in this case, and I don't know if there ever is real justice, but any kind of justice would be that this man is prosecuted for his behavior in a criminal proceeding and goes to jail. Okay, I don't even think the police are backing him up. They're not backing him up. That's why they're bringing him up on departmental charges. They have no other recourse, the police department, but to bring him up on departmental charges and get him fired and send him on his way. And I'm reasonably sure when this case is concluded that they're going to fire him. But so what? They fire him.
Now, in light of the security video that is obtained by the Daily News, can anything come of this?
Well, once the grand jury has made a decision that there is no probable cause to indict him, any subsequent evidence may not do much to resurrect this case before a Bronx grand jury. Now, there's a federal case. The federal authorities, they can take whatever information they have and say his civil rights were violated by a person in authority, and they could present it to a grand jury. But right now, the federal authorities looked at this case, and they say, well, we don't have enough evidence to bring charges in federal court.
Because there's a higher threshold.
There's a higher threshold to believe that his civil rights were violated. So that's what happened. So there's no federal charges. There's no current state criminal prosecution. This guy's getting paid. He gets free lawyers. We're talking about Hasty. He gets free lawyers that are representing him, and those are good lawyers because I know them. Those are very competent lawyers, and they have a lot of resources. They have a lot of investigators, photographers, medical experts. You'd be surprised at the type of representation police get as opposed to the general public when they get in trouble. But in any event, they have all these lawyers, and they're going to go before that hearing, and they're going to try that case, which you are not entitled to attend that hearing. That's a private hearing. It's not like the general public can go on that hearing and hear what's going on. And it's going to be a regular trial at that point, and he's going to be allowed to testify, and more likely than not, he's going to say the same thing he said before the grand jury. Well, I went into that bathroom, and I thought he was pulling out a gun, and that's why I had to defend myself and shoot him. That's what he's going to say. But without a doubt, as far as I'm concerned, and you could catch me on this one, he's going to be dismissed from the police department.
Alexander Sanchez, criminal defense attorney for Expert Bronx Criminal Lawyers, our guest in studio. Thanks for coming.
Always a pleasure.
And of course, we're going to continue to follow this, and we'll have you back soon.
Absolutely. All
righty, got to take a quick break. But listen, when we come back, we go into a full, in-depth discussion with our political commentators about last night's vice presidential debate. Now, you don't want to miss that. Stay tuned. We're coming right back right after this.